Hello everyone, back to our usual next episode. Now we are entering into the fourth episode, trying to cover a very important um, emotion. Rather, I won't say it's a disorder or psychological condition. It's more like an important emotion that we all go through in our lives: anger or impulse control. So when we say anger, we are not here referring to the normal anger that is considered to be a normal response when uh, sometimes that we all go through, more in terms of as a way of expressing that there is a problem, or especially when we have a problem, as a indication that we all get angry. So we are not looking at anger of that sort here. We are looking at it from a more problematic anger, or rather I would say it as an aggression kind of anger. So what is this? What happens with the aggression, or what happens when there is a problem anger can be, if you look at the high intensity anger, where there can be disastrous consequences, as disastrous as leading to hypertension and losing one's life. It can be that disastrous. So we are talking about that kind of a problem anger today. So before we go into what happens when we are angry, it's important for us to understand what functions this anger is, or what is the role of this anger in our lives. So it's rather trying to understand what is the function this anger is performing, so that we can understand, or whether we can replace this function with something more adaptive, something more healthy, something less damaging. So we are going to look at the functions, what anger can, how the anger is taking the role of performing a function. So the function can be different from each person. For some, anger might be doing the role of expressing their unmet needs. So when someone needs are not being met, so it can be a way of meeting the needs, the anger is coming into picture. For some others, it can be as a way of rewarding kind of a response, or rather a cooperative response from others. I'll explain this with a simple example. When we have to stop someone from a particular behavior, let us say that a child throwing a tantrum, that they wanted a particular thing immediately. So especially in a social situation, where as an adult or as a parent, your way of how to handle this situation, because when you don't want, or when you feel it is not safe for the child to get that particular demanding object, or you're not ready to get that. So either you're raising your voice, or trying to kind of scare the child, or denying the child of something that the child likes. So all these ways where the child immediately responds to anger, and then it is acting as a function. So what I'm trying to say here is that it can be rewarding that the desired response is coming from the person or the child for that matter, and then it's working. So it is performing the role of cooperation or getting cooperation. Sometimes even in an adult behavior also this can happen. So anger is performing the function of getting the cooperation or meeting your needs, or sometimes it can be a kind of um, attention seeking behavior. If someone is feeling that unless I shout loudly I am not being attended to, so it can be an attention seeking behavior, or it can be an expression of jammed up negative emotions or low self esteem, and the functions go on. So most of the times when these kind of functions are met by anger, it is established as a habitual or a problem anger. Okay, these are this is a little bit a very brief introduction about what anger, problem anger, and then how the different functions are performed by anger. So the major part of the time we spend in the effects of anger, which is very important for us when we are looking at the management of this problem anger. So it's important for us to know what effects from different perspectives, what kind of effects this problem anger can bring us, so that the motivation towards working through or managing this problem anger can be discussed. Alright, so we will divide it into different effects. Let's look at the physical effect, the problem anger and the physical effect. So basically when someone is angry, so the first response is there is a lot of physical changes that's happening in our body. There is a kind of increased heart rate, tense muscles, dryness of mouth, rapid speech, and a lot of sudden energy that is released into your blood system because of certain hormonal changes, the adrenaline rush into your blood system, and a lot of glucose releasing into your blood system where a lot of energy is released. So this sudden surge of energy into your system, which usually happens when you are doing an vigorous exercise, but then if this kind of sudden changes, rapid changes happen more often for a long time, then it can become disastrous. When it is happening through a sports or a physical exercise, it is more helping in terms of maintaining a kind of balance for the body. But here, the more longer period, the more frequently these kind of changes, rapid heart rate, increased levels of blood glucose, and then tensed muscles and increased heartbeat can lead to a hypertension and sometimes an emergency condition like heart related problems. So physical health, this is a very simplified version of how anger can be affecting the physical health. Looking at the psychological health. So we look at psychological health where from the perspective of how anger can bring in depression, anger can bring in more a kind of an expression of an emotional disorder. So when someone is expressing this problem anger, we are looking at it more from a destructive kind of an anger, where there is a high level of stress building up in the mind of the person, and the behavior can affect the relationships of the person immediately, where within the close family members, the effect how the person reacts to the family members, close family members, can sometimes become very disastrous. And sometimes anger can be an expression of a pent up negative emotions, a jammed up kind of negative emotions, it can be an expression of depression. Sometimes it can be an expression of a high level of anxiety, like we have discussed in our anxiety conditions. When that system of control is not there, one might end up in a very problematic, angry condition. So what we are looking from a psychological perspective is more in terms of anger as an emotional disorder, anger as a destructive to one's close family relationships, and lack of empathy and so on. So looking at the effect on the family life, a little more extension of the previous effect. So relationships are the most uh, immediate family relationships where there can be a permanent long-term damage that can happen, and the most hit are the children. So when an adult or a parent is modeling anger repeatedly, and to get the cooperation of the children or for the disciplinary purpose, the adult is actually modeling and then teaching the child that with anger things can happen. So modeling is something where the young children are learning, and then they're getting this kind of habit that unless you get angry, things cannot be under control, kind of a thing. So that is effect on the children, and it can affect the adult to adult relationships equally, where the family environment can be very tense, the family environment can be very emotionally highly charged up, where which is not congenial for a happy family life. So that is the effect on the family life. Looking at the effect on friends and friendships. So mainly when you are a person who get angry very fast, people are a little inhibited to come close to you, or the peer interactions can be limited by that, because the friendship is all about sharing and trust building. So someone who has this sudden surge of anger, um, uh, but them it's difficult to especially form and maintain long-term friendships. So there is a drastic effect on the friends and friendships. Effect on schooling, especially for the children. There is effect on schooling. It can affect with the way that they respond to the authority, especially to the teachers, as well as especially a pre-teen 10 plus years child, whenever there is an authority coming into picture as a disciplinary, so there can be a way of oppositional or rebellious way of responding to the authority. And it's often found in the research that their scholastics or the school performance is very much affected when the children are losing the control very fast. So there is a significant effect on the school life. Looking at the effect of law, the serious physical crimes, the assaults and loss of life. So the serious physical crimes, the basic emotion underlying is aggression. So there can be a serious threats with the law or legal system. And the quality of life. Looking at the quality of life, very unhappy, discontent, and the someone how we value ourselves shows how we can value others. So someone who is always feeling very low and low self-esteem about oneself cannot respect the other person, or their ability to manage this anger can come in conflict with the value system, and mainly in terms of sustaining and maintaining the friendships as well as long-term relationships. Not the least, but on the financial aspect, the financial effects. So when one is angry, a lot of physical agitation, breaking things, throwing valuable things can be a costly affair. It can be breaking your cell phones or throwing books or bricks on the windows, destroying the furniture. So it's going to be a costly. So anger can be financially costly. These are the very briefly how anger can affect one's life. Coming back to the important management. So what happens in anger management? What do we do in anger management? So like we said, we have to look at the functions that it is performing for each person in order to manage the anger. If that function, whether it's a low self-esteem or whether it's being not able to express the emotions in a more constructive way, when we address this particular function that is performed by the anger, that's what we focus in anger management. It's not same for everyone. So we need to do a little bit of detailed assessment for each person and tailor make the management program. So mainly we look at the technical aspects like we have discussed in a previous episode of CPT, those who are following my videos. So there are a set of behavior techniques that help us to handle the behaviors, and there are a set of cognitive techniques where in order to work through our belief systems and our dysfunctional assumptions. So the same way we will mainly divide these anger management into how to build the necessary skills more in terms of a constructive kind of skills. So if you look at most of them who get anger very fast has very poor social skills. So working with their social skills, helping them to understand and empathize with the persons is very important. The empathy where they feel towards the other person, what they might be going through when they are showing these anger reactions is very important. So one need to sensitize to these aspects, bringing the empathy, making the person much more refined in social situations is something. And then how to handle anger by distracting immediately, because when the sudden release of energy can immediately make the habit of reaction very fast. So it's important that one need to develop certain distractions where immediately that pent up anger or the sudden surge of anger is vent in such a way where there are not much disastrous consequences. Like it can be like as simple as punching a pillow, or as simple as doing a vigorous exercise in order to let out that sudden surge of energy that comes. And at a later point where once they are able to bring in the physical agitation part into much more calmer, it's important that how they can verbalize and express this anger in a much more constructive way, more of a problem solving approach, understanding as to how, if there are more long term relational issues, how to work through their conflict management or how to resolve the different conflicts in the relationships. So based on each person's needs, the program is made, mainly focusing on building their skills as well as diffusing this anger. These are the two areas that we focus in the CBT. So this is in brief about what a problem anger and how this anger can be identified, and then how one can approach the help at the earliest, like how it becomes a habit, and then how you have to replace with a healthy habit. That's for today. Thank you so much.